Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Thursday, May 2nd, 2024. Time for another show, or perhaps not time for another show, if you follow an even higher law than, I don't know, the United States law and the Constitution. Wow. So this morning's social media chatter includes, I guess, the discussion of another outrageous op-ed, this time, once again, run by the New York Times, for no particular reason, more or less endorsing a Trump dictatorship. But that is to say, I don't know. It's a guest opinion piece, but honestly, I don't know how you get it past an editor. But Matthew Schmitz, who I've never really heard of, but who apparently, well, he's credited here as founder and editor of Compact, which is, I'm sure, nothing you've ever heard of. But as others have pointed out, oh, well, that's an interesting way of crediting him when he is an editor at the American Conservative, which, though disgusting and horrible, and you probably don't read on the regular, you probably have heard of, and you would be able to say, oh, now I understand where this person is coming from. So, an interesting perspective, let's say, on Trump, that he is calling for dictatorship, but in the democratic spirit, you see. And if all of this stuff disturbs you, that he is living a life of criminality at this point and total defiance to our rule of law, well, that's only because he's following a higher law. So that's good news. Everybody now can follow higher laws. And if I just wanted to let you know, I've discovered one that's even higher than his. Now, there was 8-minute law. Now, Trump has come out with 7-minute law, but I'll trump him with 6-minute law. It's even higher. It's honest to God, as I said this morning, and I guess it's catching on because it's actually true. Ordinarily, we see the kind of logic that this author displays either in mass shooter manifestos. I know it's illegal for me to slaughter everybody in this office building or school, but I answer to a higher authority. I follow a higher law. Or we will see it occasionally in calls for the assassination of the sort of figure for which he's rooting here, Donald Trump. There was nothing I could do. A higher law called me to eliminate this traumatic figure who's taken over our lives. It's the sort of thing that, well, when people write it down, they need to be investigated. I don't know. But, certainly this is a New York Times piece, so let's not all lose our minds here. I mean, after all, who's going to be reading it? Wow. Well, I didn't expect to spend the first moment of the morning on this. There's lots to round up from elsewhere. The guy he's talking about resumes his criminal trial in New York City. Protests continue to morph all over the country, in some cases finally being settled and being moved out of the way for commencement, and other places being moved to other parts of the campus and allowed to continue. There's a lot of dynamic involved in that. And, lots of other things as well, including action in Congress, where we can now thank all the Christian white nationalists coming out to help everybody with a new definition of how come you'll be arrested if they think you're anti-Semitic. So, well, golly, it's really been something of a week. Speaking of the protests, I guess I want to get this out of the way as well. Not only did things fall apart in UCLA yesterday, and I think we managed to make mention of the fact that there was, you can't even call them counter-protesters, but I guess that's how they were initially labeled. But certainly opponents of the Palestinian encampment at UCLA, protesting from an explicitly pro-Israel standpoint, I guess. They're really just pro-mayhem. But anyway, in addition to, I think we mentioned the fact that they came and they roughed everybody, they beat everybody up. They fired fireworks into the encampment. Anyway, the more details emerging about this stuff. And the more detail we get, and we're getting photographs, etc. This was, honest to God, just absolute mayhem. And it's going to be a big black eye for the UCLA administration that they didn't step in and prevent this from getting as bad as it did. And so far, I mean, it's early days, and I imagine we'll finally see the hammer come down on people who they can identify as having been a part of this. But those things move slowly, and outrage does not. But just wanted to kind of acknowledge that. And the student paper there writing all about it as well. Also a good source of information and a general feeling on campus to turn to those guys. And this is at the end of their school year, too. I think they'd rather be concentrating on finals and getting the hell out of there. Probably packing things up and getting ready to move back home or into a place for summer classes. And they didn't really need this. Wow. So there's plenty. Greg Dworkin has something of a method to the approach to the morning's news. Good morning, Greg.
Hi,
I
bring
from you.
And hopefully you could see the method in it and then explain it to me.
All right. Or else we'll all just indulge in madness.
So I was going to do this in a different order, but since you brought it up, let's talk about the campus stuff a little bit.
Ruined it. Okay.
I mean, because there's a lot to say.
Yes.
A couple of interesting things here. I mean, I'm thinking of these so-called pro-Israeli protesters who arrived en masse on campus and just started violence. And in my head, I keep thinking of them as West Bank settlers.
Yeah.
And probably what happened is they, just flew over here from the West Bank and decided to beat some people up here because they couldn't beat up enough people.
I don't know. It is a weird thing. I don't know who they are exactly.
I don't know who they are, and I don't know what that has to do with the university. But what's interesting is, first of all, every single campus has a different circumstance, so it's very hard to lump them all together.
Yes, this is a good point, something I've been thinking about.
Second, this is from the New York Times story, and I don't believe everything I read in the New York Times, but the fact stuff they usually get
now
right.
You can't, yes.
And as part of this article about what's going on there, the UCLA Palestinian Solidarity Encampment.
Yeah.
To be distinct from the Palestinian Encampment Solidarity Group, which is different than the People's Front for the Liberation of Judea.
Okay.
The UCLA Palestinian Solidarity Encampment, which says it is made up of students, faculty members, and community members, condemn the school's pretense of student safety. To me, you don't have community members. You want to make this a student protest on the campus,
it would be better if
keep it at students. But that's got nothing to do and pales behind what happened with the outside people coming in and causing the violence.
I mean,
what I'm
if they're
saying
community
is,
members, you can't hit community members
when you say
either.
that there's outside members involved in both sides, that's probably true. But the proportional part of it, we have to find out who that group was. I mean, if it turns out they were Proud Boys, we need to know that.
Yeah, that would be of interest. Interesting, your picture of West Bank settlers. Certainly, the mental, the mindset certainly matches. I had this weird mental picture, except I don't know if this happens West Coast, but like if it would have been an East Coast New York school, I'm thinking like Brighton Beach tracksuit Russians. You know, like, why are they doing this?
Michael Cohen's medallion people?
Yeah, essentially, right. So, but
nice
I don't know if that happens
here.
West
It'd be a
Coast.
shame if something happened to it.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying here?
But, yeah, I don't know who. Well, they got wackos everywhere, and apparently L.A. too. And somebody actually made an interesting point that perhaps they hadn't shown up in the New York City encampments to rough people up because it's hard to get in there and find a parking space, but not so in L.A.
I mean, there's no place to park, right? So, that's a big deal. Now,
I'm not going to take mass transit for this.
One of the best, I have two great articles here. One of them is from The Onion.
Oh, okay. Under new ownership, I understand.
Yes, under new ownership. So Ben Collins, who's now their editor/publisher, reposted this from 2018. These kids should be in school instead of protesting, say people so tantalizingly close to getting the point.
Oh, Wells. Yeah. Okay.
It's The Onion. It's great. But the really good one was on BBC NewsHour. And they interviewed Juliet Kayyem. I don't know if you know Juliet Kayyem. She's a frequent Twitter commenter.
Yes.
She is an ex-Homeland Security advisor in the Obama administration.
Okay.
Her specialty is national and international security threats, so she's a security expert.
All right.
Better than all of that, okay,
yeah,
is that she was born in L.A. and has one kid at Columbia and another kid at Brown.
All right. Well,
and so the question on the table for her is when is law enforcement needed in protests? Security expert weighs in, and the answer is the bottom line of the universities is they have to protect the students. So if students are being hurt, you call in the cops. And to her, although she started off very funny. This is a broadcast interview, and this is the transcript.
Oh,
but she said, I have this kid at Columbia, and then the interviewer asked her about Brown, and she said, look, you're going to think I have 20 kids, but I have another kid at Brown. But she was born in L.A. of Lebanese parents, and she's got a really interesting perspective. And basically, she says, look, there's a difference between protest and unlawful trespass. You want to set up a tent city, that's one thing. You break into Hamilton Hall, that's something else.
Sure.
You break in, you're going to get arrested.
Yes.
Right? And secondly, you have to provide off-ramps for protesters in terms of escalation techniques, like Brown, which you brought up yesterday, which did a good job about de-escalating things by agreeing to have discussions about divestiture, which doesn't mean that that's going anywhere, because if you want to do divestiture, you're basically saying you can't invest the endowment anywhere. We talked about why yesterday. Everything is so interrelated with everything else, you don't even know what you're investing in. You'd have to have a division just devoted to trying to tease out what does what and what does something else, and then you have no control over that, because often you don't get a choice in what people that you give your money to then invest the money in.
It's certainly harder as an individual. I mean, I guess as an institutional investor, you can make demands about it, but that may take some time.
Everything is slow.
And it won't come out right either.
And even if you said that, it may take 3 years to unwind, so.
Nor will anyone ever believe that you're fully divested. That's not my definition of divestment.
Right.
All right.
Anyway, so so Brown did well. Columbia did just like okay. I mean, they really didn't define where they were at, and they did manage to clear the area without anybody getting hurt, so that's a plus on their side.
Okay, that's a good one.
UCLA did it worst. I mean, they were the most
They didn't do
tolerant,
anything, and then they
didn't do anything when they really needed to do something.
So they were tolerant of both sides.
This
and that turned out to be problematic.
Thing, right? So,
they were tolerant of the violent people. That's not great.
And then the last thing I'm going to say is what Chris Hayes brought up yesterday.
Wow.
Which is, look, it's easier to argue about what college kids are doing than confront the human misery and destruction that's happening in the actual conflict.
That seems.
And so, maybe we should be talking about Gaza and the West Bank and what's going on in Israel, not so much what's going on the campuses.
Yes.
But that's his point of view.
He has no kids in there.
Yeah, and
he's got kids, I think, but they're not there.
I'm all for protest.
Yeah.
It's not that I will decide how you protest. That's up to you. But if you break into buildings, that's stupid. Because what the protests are for are trying to convince people to be on your side. Mm-hmm. And if you're not thinking about that as you organize,
well,
or if there's outside
it's a traditional
money coming
thing,
in, which is from unsavory groups, that's not so good.
No, it's a traditional thing. Encampments escalate to a building occupation, and sometimes they even
because you do the encampment, you didn't get what you wanted because what you're asking for is impossible.
Sometimes
so then
that's the reason.
It up the next notch. Yeah, but what you're asking for is still impossible. So what then?
Yeah, well, then you get arrested. There are people who are bound and determined to get arrested, and that's part of their plan. And if that's part of your plan, then your plan's working. I mean, not the results part, but the arrest part, you got it down.
Anyway, commencement and then summer vacation come.
Yes.
Some people are saying, well, what's the point of the GOP saying they're going to make this the focus of their agenda from now till November because the rest of their agenda is a complete failure? We'll get to that. And others say, well, what's the point of that? Commencement in a couple of weeks and then vacation. So, what happened to your agenda?
Yeah,
your agenda went home for the summer?
In many cases, yes.
But not in all cases. Again, I'm old enough to remember I read that, college is over in a couple of weeks. I'm thinking back to when I was a kid, how the Boston University strike dorm stayed open all summer with the protesters.
Yeah. I mean,
I went and visited it a couple of times, had friends there. And, it doesn't completely close down.
There will certainly be places where people say, well, this will be my job for the summer.
But it will be a much smaller contingent. So, again, nobody knows how this is going to play out. I'm not going to tell you how it's going to play out, but don't let anybody else tell you how it's going to play out. We don't know.
Yeah, because if somebody else starts, we might not get a chance to tell you later.
So
we'll talk over them.
I got to talk about some small stuff, including some procedure.
All right.
But before I get to that, Arizona.
Okay. What year is it?
1864. Actually, it's 2024. But yesterday, the state Senate matched the state House.
Okay.
And both of them had 2 Republicans vote with the Democrats to repeal the 1864 law that didn't allow abortion under any circumstance.
Okay. All right.
The repeal needs to be finalized with Katie Hobbs signing it, which she said she would. In that case, abortions in Arizona will be governed by a 2022 law that prohibits the procedure after 15 weeks of pregnancy, no exception for rape or incest. So there's still going to be a ballot issue about that in the fall. Great. And this is still an election issue.
Okay.
But the actual repeal won't take effect until 90 days after the legislature adjourns for the summer.
90 days after
adjournment. The 1864 ban could still end up temporarily derailing abortions, except that the Democratic Attorney General and Planned Parenthood are going to sue, and so you don't know what's going to happen because suits often delay things. Ask Donald Trump.
Yes, true. And an appropriate use of derailing for 1864. There's a lot of derailment going on then.
Right.
The rail era.
So as a Republican stood up.
Derail era. Yes.
To say why she voted to repeal, a Republican, whose husband is one of the Arizona Supreme Court justices who upheld the law.
Oh.
Suggested her vote to repeal the ban could be the best shot for conservatives to thwart the abortion ballot measure. As she spoke, abortion opponents watching from the public gallery erupted with angry shouts, "Come on, this is a disgrace. One day you will face a just and holy God." It's splitting the Republican Party in Arizona, which is already split. This is the Carrie Lake, Kelly, whatever her name is. Kelly Ward, the one that was indicted.
Oh, okay.
So Arizona is a Republican mess.
All right.
Yes, it's true. If you look at the polls, Trump seems to be doing okay in Arizona at the moment. Number one, don't believe the polls. And number two, look at the structural issues that are going on there. Arizona is absolutely positively still in play. What you could argue is that it's not Biden's best swing state right now, but no way, shape, or form is it off the table for Biden to win there, especially with all of this going on. So that needs to be thrown in.
Okay.
Okay, but here's the procedural stuff. This will maybe take us through the hour, maybe it won't. We've talked about how unusual it is for the minority party to vote for a rule that the majority party is promulgating in Rules Committee.
Right.
Because you never want to empower the majority party, because if they think they can do stuff, they'll try to do stuff. And as a minority party, you generally don't want that because what they generally pick is stuff you don't like.
Sure.
However, there's another little procedure thing here. Not only is it incredibly unusual, it's not unprecedented because people have done this before, but not only is it incredibly unusual for Democrats to vote for the rule to get the rule passed, which is what they did to get the Ukraine money passed, but now in this Congress they did something else, which hasn't happened in 5 or 6 or 7 years.
Okay.
And that is the Republicans voted, 6 of them, voted with the Democratic minority to recommit something. A motion to recommit passed.
Oh. Yeah, that hasn't happened
That
in a
doesn't
while.
usually happen.
No, not Not for a while.
6 members of the House Freedom Caucus joined with all Democrats to derail the, very important, had to pass, Mining Regulatory Clarity Act. As the House approved a motion to recommit the bill, Biggs, Bishop, Crane, Gaetz, Good, and Luna
this must be
all
something
voted for
weird.
the House Freedom Caucus. And so what's a motion to recommit, you might ask? I got this in Politico Pro back in 2019.
Yeah.
According to House rules, a motion to recommit provides one final opportunity for the House to debate and amend a measure before the Speaker orders a final vote. So basically, a motion to recommit, by my reading here, sends it back to committee, and sometimes with suggested text, sometimes not.
Yes.
But the point is, instead of voting on it to go to the floor, you vote to put it back in committee, which is different than a motion to table, which basically just shuts it down.
Yes, it's a recommit. It goes to a committee.
So did I get that right?
Yes. And the last time it likely happened, it was actually the subject of quite a lot of discussion and writing on Daily Kos in the period from, say, 2004 through, and then on through 2008 or so. As the last motions to recommit, I recall passing, were actually when Democrats had taken back the control of the House after 2006, and it was Rahm Emanuel's strategy to free Democrats to vote with Republicans on motions to recommit so that they wouldn't be targeted by ads, in the upcoming election. And it was actually quite a disaster.
Yeah. So that did happen.
Yeah.
But the last time it happened was for the very same reason. It was in 2019.
Okay.
Bipartisan Background Checks Act. And basically what happened is it was supposed to pass. Democrats were in control. Mm-hmm. Republicans implemented a lesser-known procedural tool known as the motion to recommit. And what happened is they added an immigration thing to it.
Yes.
And
interesting
so,
the way they described it.
Republicans managed to sway 26 Democratic members to send it back to committee.
Yes.
So that they wouldn't be on record in these swing districts of voting against illegal immigrants getting access to guns.
Yes. They're usually gotcha type votes. Interesting the way they describe that, a lesser known procedure. It's attached to more or less every single bill that ever gets voted on in the House of Representatives. And if you're a C-SPAN watcher, I guess rolling your eyes, but nobody is a C-SPAN watcher, but it happens on every bill. It's just routinely defeated.
Exactly. Same as the rule. Yeah. You can't call defeating a rule a lesser known procedure. It's like attached to everything.
Yeah, right. You rarely see anything about it because it usually just happens according to plan, because those are the numbers of, the Democrats vote with Dems and Republicans vote with Republicans, and the numbers ahead of time, and so do the leaders, and they only bring it to the floor if it's going to work. So you rarely see it work or fail, depending on how you do it.
I was laughing because Matt Glassman wrote words to the effect of, "Look, I teach policy and procedure in the House.
Yeah,
I teach it, and I've had to add an asterisk to my classes that everything I teach you about how things work doesn't apply to this Congress."
Yeah, pretty much. Motion to recommit. Boy, all right. I'm glad to see it, but yeah, usually these are gotcha votes, and they're very difficult on their face to turn your back on. If you're in a close race, that's the idea of them. But the usual reason that the leadership of either party will give their members is, listen, this is an unvetted amendment that they just sprung on us. They don't have any obligation to show us the language of it beforehand. There's no hearings on it. There's no procedure in which you can examine it. You just can't give the other side the chance to amend the bill sight unseen. Don't do it.
So we won't do that. But in this
sometimes
case,
it works.
I have no idea whether it was anything important, but it looks like the Freedom Caucus just wanted to stick it to Mike Johnson.
Okay.
Now, what's also interesting,
Matt Gaetz wants to stick it to a lot of people,
is the actual vote.
Yeah.
This is H.R. 2925. Okay. Republicans 6 yay, 204 nay, not voting 7. Democrats, 204 yay, 0 nay, 8 not voting. So there's 15 that didn't vote. It passes 210 to 204. It just allows me to make the point that you may call this a one-vote Republican majority because they can't afford to lose more than one vote. But the fact of the matter is it's rare that everybody's there. You know that. You've said it often. Here's a great example. There are 15 people missing.
Yeah, and that's not a lot.
And that happens all the time.
Yeah. Every day, all the time, and it'll fluctuate through the day. You know, the next vote of the day, 12 of them are missing. The next vote after that, 18 of them are missing. Whatever.
Right. Given the time, we may or may not finish this before the break. So the next procedure thing to discuss is your favorite.
Oh, good.
MTV. I want my MTV.
Okay.
So Matt Glassman says, you can keep offering Rule 9 QOP to vacate office as Speaker. I say stick with the 118th procedural fund, and instead of a voice vote to table, how about the voice vote on question of consideration? Defeat that by voice vote. Nobody has to go on record. Why is that important? Marjorie Taylor Greene knows she's lost, but she wants people on the record as voting for Mike Johnson. If you do these procedural things and do it by voice vote, it's not on the record. So that's what's going to be watched.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I guess so.
I don't understand anything I just read to you, but hopefully you do and you can explain it after the break.
I guess so. I mean, I don't see any tremendous advantage
QOP,
over a voice.
Question of procedure?
Question of privilege, I would
Rule 9,
imagine.
question of privilege.
Yeah. All right. Well, you can do anything on voice vote if they'll let you get away with it, I suppose.
And what are the rules for letting you get away with it after the break?
Sup, fam? It's your boy Darwin, aka Darwin_Darko, aka the most reasonable man in America, aka KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio.
Do you know what time it is?
No. What?
Does anybody really know what time it is?
Does
anybody really care about time? Listen, it's 9:30.
Oh, no.
That means that in New York, Donald Trump is starting up with Marshawn on the bench. I don't know if he's on the bench yet, but he's about to be.
Oh.
And it's going to have the next phase of his contempt hearing.
Oh,
4 more things have been brought up.
Because he won't shut up.
But not these things, I think, happened prior to Marshawn saying, you do this again, I might have to jail you. But he's warned Trump about going to jail before this.
That's true.
So he's already had
this
that
is gonna
warning.
make things complicated.
I don't know what's going to happen today. And since we were talking about the students and the GOP wanting to use these protests as the next caravan, because that's their agenda, I thought, since the GOP is saying students who break the law should be put in jail, no exception, I say put Trump in jail today for violating the gag order.
Why
no
not?
exception.
Yeah.
And the GOP will go, no, you can't put
Not
people
like
in
that.
jail merely for this, that, or...
Yes, we can if it's in service to a higher law.
Well, I say you do that. It's a twofer. You get Trump in jail, and at the same time, you sort of defang the whole GOP push. So just do it.
I don't object. Yeah, I'm worried about this causing stupid complications, not putting him in jail, but the idea that, as you pointed out, the judge will be getting there, and the judge trying to sort things out. Well, there's 4 new allegations, and yes, I did warn you that if you do it again, you're going to jail, or you could. But
he warned him about that
before,
prior to saying it again.
Yeah.
With the first 10.
So
we don't know what he's going to do.
All right. Well, it's going to be.
You have to be a lawyer, but the lawyers are citing when Marshawn mentioned jail even before the 10.
Okay, then.
That's a thing. He's got his rights. He's the judge.
And also, I mean, this whole thing about you could go to jail for contempt. We have that written down. Yeah, I mean, it happened before you came to court. Right. This isn't a warning for you specifically, puffy orange
So we'll see what happens. Could be very interesting. And then we resume the trial.
All right.
Now, the trial is still dealing with David? I forget his name. Henderson.
Me too. Who?
Or whoever. Davidson. Keith Davidson.
Oh, yeah.
David Henderson. Keith Davidson.
Harley Davidson.
Keith Davidson is the lawyer for both McDougal and Stormy Daniels. Karen McDougal and Stormy Daniels.
Yes, it's a very
And at the end of the
sexy
trial,
practice.
Last we met, which was on Tuesday,
yes,
the prosecution was struggling a bit trying to get the ability to ask the question of this lawyer, did you know whether or not Trump was involved with this? And the judge wouldn't let him ask. So the prosecutor tried like 5 different times, and every time the objection was sustained. The jury heard it.
Yeah.
Which maybe was his intent. But that's where we're going to resume. So we'll see what happens there.
See if they can get around to figuring out
it's
a way
going
to
to be a day of
question.
trial. So, that's all I have to say about that.
Okay.
But, the contempt part of it is certainly going to be exciting. So the fireworks, followed by boredom, because trials usually are boring. And then we'll see what happens. And we'll see who they call today. I don't know who they're going to call. So far, except for not being able to nail the lawyer for McDougal and Stormy Daniels on whether or not you knew Trump was involved, everything has been going exactly the way the prosecution wants. They've made the case. They told their story. They've corroborated with. They have hard data. It's going to be very difficult for the defense to unravel this.
Okay. I mean,
it's clearly done in the service of the campaign, not for Melania, citing that he's a family man and, puts him on, garbage. Not happening. Plus, then they're going to bring the receipts and they're going to show tapes and documents which purport to show that Trump knew. So we'll see how well they prove that. That's the one thing they still have to prove. Trump knew about it.
Okay.
Cohen will say Trump knew about it. I didn't just do this on my own. He wouldn't let me buy lunch without telling him. He's not going to let me, spend $130,000 of money, and then reimburse me for it without understanding what it's for. So of course he you can't believe Michael Cohen. Yeah, but you can believe the checks.
Right. You can believe that Donald Trump doesn't let go of money easily.
So that's the sort of stuff that's going to wind up coming up. So
okay.
Just so that you're aware, that your listeners are aware, that's what's coming up. But back to Give Me My MTV. It's going to be really, really interesting to see how this is going to play out for Marjorie Taylor Greene. It is possible that if she is defeated on procedural motions and doesn't get her I just want to make noise, I'm a noisemaker, not a lawmaker, ability to threaten the speaker, does that break the back of the Freedom Caucus? Because arguably, as we're getting closer to the election, the rest of the Republicans are sick and tired of these guys.
Yes. I'll remind everybody, Marjorie Taylor Greene is too crazy for the Freedom Caucus. They kicked her out.
Right.
For not being crazy enough, which is also weird, but it's hard to explain the dynamics, but she's not a member. It's not
supposed to make sense.
She's not a member, but she really is. But she's not. So, but they vote with her. I don't know. Right. But
the question on the table for you, this is a privileged question.
Okay.
So you have to answer it. Is how does Mike Johnson manage the question of a privilege motion if she decides that she wants to bring a privilege motion, which she claims she will.
Yes.
But only after the press conference. But she's been threatening to do that for 2 weeks now.
A very short period of time. Well, there's a lot of things, and ultimately, this is always your favorite answer. The gavel will answer that question if you choose to use it that way. Mm-hmm. One of the things that she thinks she'll get attention for this, and she thinks she'll get a vote on this thing. But there's a lot of ways to avoid having a vote, and a lot of ways to avoid giving her attention, up to and including saying essentially, "Nuh-uh," when she says things. Like, for instance, Mr. Speaker, I have a privileged motion at the desk, which ordinarily would mean, okay, that means immediate consideration, to which you can say, no, you don't. Oh, or you can say, hello, who's there? One answer to I have a privileged motion at the desk is, no, you don't. Yes, I do. It's right there at the desk. But is it privileged? I say it is. Well, I have the gavel, and I say it isn't. The parliamentarian informs me that it does not qualify as a question of privilege. Sometimes the parliamentarian will then say, but I said it did. Shh, quiet. Or they'll say, I was compliant, and it isn't. And that makes a difference. And there are often rules about who can claim to be offering things on a privileged basis and who is not. Ordinarily, something as fundamental to the functioning of the House as is there or is there not someone in the Speaker's chair would be privileged, but you certainly can say, no, it isn't, to which she can say, yes, it is, and I demand a vote on whether you're right or wrong. I appeal your ruling, to which somebody can then say, well, I move to table your motion to appeal. Oh, well, yeah, there's layers upon layers upon layers. If you have the gavel and you want it to come out this way, it will come out that way. It may
as long as you have
later.
Allies. As long as you have the votes.
Right.
And in this case, they absolutely will.
So there you go. That's why you could do it. And one of the things you mentioned earlier, to do this on a voice vote, there are different things that they could fight over, whether or not the question is privileged. They could fight over whether or not she should be recognized for this purpose, to offer it. You could fight over whether or not you are, in fact, that the House actually wants to consider this thing. If it's not privileged and she's not able to bring it up as of right immediately, you could just say, why are we voting on this? I think we should move on to something else. Oh, that's a good motion. All in favor say aye. People scream. Those opposed say no, because you do have to ask. Maybe even more people scream no. And then, again, C-SPAN watchers will recognize the next thing that comes up. In the opinion of the chair, because that matters, the ayes have it. And then the motion is agreed to. And then all the people who are saying no, maybe even in greater numbers, start screaming, no. Mr. Speaker, I want to appeal, and I can't hear you. I didn't hear anything. Sorry.
I can't hear you.
You wanted to appeal. I feel bad about that, because ordinarily I want to entertain every possible appeal, but I just didn't hear you. Sorry. So loud in here.
Don Quixote, a friend of the show, brought this up this morning in regard to the Trump trial, but it's actually appropriate for Marjorie Taylor Greene in Congress and maybe even the Speaker. And the question on the table is, has the judge ruled yet about bringing an air horn into the courtroom? Can you bring it into Congress? I can't hear you.
Sorry.
There's this air horn going on, and I've got pencils in my ears. I can't hear you.
And it's legitimately true, too. Also, C-SPAN watchers will laugh about these things, usually because on C-SPAN everybody is mic'd. So very often at the podium you're screaming into the microphone, and on TV everybody can hear you saying, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, and the speaker says, I can't hear you. But in the room, everybody's mic'd. Not everybody, but I mean, there's 5 microphones going off plus 400 other people saying in the background. I don't know why they do that, but they do. That's what it sounds like. And you can't hear it. You can't hear a damn thing.
Right.
And you can legitimately get away with that.
So if I were Mike Johnson, I would have a vested interest in defanging Marjorie Taylor Greene any possible way. And if you could do it over a motion to vacate, all the sweeter. So I say he should go ahead, use the power of the gavel, not hit her with it. but do it metaphorically.
Yes, or you could throw it and say, I didn't hit her, I just let go.
No, you can only do that with the really big gavel they get at the beginning.
Oh, yeah, they could make the mace. The mace is made for that sort of thing. It's not actually built for that, but I mean, symbolically, you're supposed to club somebody.
Designed for, is for hitting people on the head.
Now they're too fancy. They'll break. They're expensive to replace.
Yeah.
I mean, that's it. That's the symbol of authority is I'm going to hit you with this. Yeah, I guess, ultimately. And now we see the violence inherent in the system.
Yeah, exactly right.
Well, it always was. So this could be interesting. And yeah, they could dispose of this with a voice vote. I think that was what Matt Glassman was after, in saying, and then there's no record taken. And you can say, I voted whatever you want, whatever the crowd you are in front of now wants to hear. You say you voted that way, and there's no record that can prove otherwise.
Say it's true or not true.
That's right. So voice vote, an excellent tool for things like that. And they can make problems go away.
Right.
They're suspect.
So in the meantime,
but
because there was a break in the trial for Wednesdays, yesterday was Wednesday,
right?
Trump had the opportunity to go do a couple of rallies. I think he did one in Michigan and one in Wisconsin. And very interestingly, on the one hand, he didn't talk about the trial at all, so he didn't violate the gag order, so he's not going to jail for what he said yesterday.
Okay.
And on the other hand, it was the same normal Trump rally he always does. Yeah. The only new thing he sort of threw in is he was highlighting his Time interview points about, wanting this to be the Handmaid's Tale if he gets reelected.
I see. Which, is new, sort of, except that the Time magazine interview was all of the things he says at rallies. So it's a little bit of a loop here.
Right. But, he means what he says and he says what he means.
Yeah. And one guy in the New York Times says that's awesome because higher law.
I meant what I say, and I said what I meant. An elephant faithful 100%. That would be him. So when he says it, believe it.
Okay.
Believe it the first time, as the saying goes.
He means it.
He means it.
I don't think he can do a lot of it, but only because, logistics. It doesn't mean he can't make people miserable in the meantime. And it's like, for instance, the deportation plans. I don't know. There's now a debate also in the New York Times, like, logistically, how would that work? I mean, it'll be troublesome, but he has a plan. I mean, he doesn't have a plan, and very frequently it doesn't matter whether it works or not, and who cares whether it's feasible or not? It's illegal and immoral to begin with.
So he wants he said he'd get, whatever camps he needs put together to do this.
That's crazy.
He wants to monitor women during their pregnancy, at least in red states. And he wants to pardon most of the January 6th rioters.
That's
all of those things are incredibly unpopular, by the way.
Yeah. All right, so let's vote against them and hope that other people will too. And they're difficult to get done, but it doesn't matter because if he's president, if he never delivers on any of that, what does he care? He just wants to run around and have rallies.
Now, this piece is from yesterday, and although Trump isn't concerned about those things, it's the same thing he says all the time, only, if he says it, believe it. This is an article in Politico about what is upsetting the Trump camp, and not the trial, not his rallies, not his policies, but radical FNK Jr.
Oh.
RFK Jr. is all over conservative media. Trump's camp is concerned. The independent presidential candidate is quickly becoming a thorn in Donald Trump's side. That's because recent polls are showing he actually takes more votes away from Trump, especially if you tell people about his anti-vaccine views. And it's another sign of the rising threat that Kennedy, the independent presidential candidate, poses to Trump. He doesn't like that they're on conservative media platforms because he wants to control everything. And the problem is if he goes on Ben Shapiro, Glenn Beck, Megyn Kelly, that's Trump turf.
Yeah.
And so people hear Kennedy and they like what he says, that's Trump's turf. That's going to take Trump voters away. Biden's voters don't watch those things.
Yeah, that's true.
It's concerning and beyond logic, said Chris LaCivita, Trump's co-campaign manager, that there are some conservative platforms that continue to give a voice to someone that is called the NRA, a terrorist group who believes in eliminating gas-powered engines, believes in a 70% tax bracket, and generally subscribes to the same school of thought as Karl Marx. The thing I like about the Republicans is they ain't subtle.
No. Wow. Well, what can I tell you?
They're frustrated.
Boo-hoo.
How does Kennedy get on these airwaves anyway?
I can't believe it's beyond logic.
They're not even asking us. How are they not asking us before they let somebody on? It's unbelievable.
Yeah. Well, maybe they can get some of the L.A. counter-protesters to help them out.
In a statement to Politico, Ben Shapiro, one of the conservative hosts who's interviewed Kennedy, described him as a fascinating figure worth interviewing. He's the highest polling third-party candidate since Ross Perot. With that said, I've made clear I support Trump's re-election effort and even have co-hosted a campaign event for him because, like, I'm totally neutral.
Yeah. Give me some press passes.
Right.
Okay.
So there you go. In a way, Kennedy's taken the tack of a B-level Republican Senate candidate, the GOP strategist said. Kennedy seems to be following a strategy employed by a number of GOP candidates, trying to drive up their name recognition among conservatives, not just going on Fox and Newsmax, but taking advantage of the proliferation of right-leaning podcasts and other programming. The same thing that the New York Times complains about when Joe Biden does it, because you're not talking to us, you're talking to these other popular sites where people can hear you without us putting our slant on it.
I don't even know if I'm following anymore. I'm lost.
The New York Times doesn't like you to go to these people.
New York Times.
Trump doesn't like you to go to these people. You know who's going to these people? Candidates are going to these people. You know why? They have audiences.
All right. I mean, yeah.
I don't.
But I don't. Okay. Well, he did say at the outset, lascivita, it defies logic, and it does. So there you go. The whole thing defies logic. Both sides.
I say RFK should go on Joe Rogan. I say RFK should go on. Name your influencer, who I can't even think of.
The Matt Schlapp Show. I don't know.
Yeah, whatever.
Does he have one?
You know, let him go on. Let him have his piece. Let him talk about vaccines, especially.
What else am I going to do? I don't have control over. Yeah, sure. I mean, I don't know. Oh, barricades. We could try that. Barricade the podcasters in their own homes from the outside. Will that work? I don't know. It doesn't matter. I don't. What am I supposed to do? I don't care. This is Chris Lascivita complaining. Good. I'm glad you're upset. There. I don't need to concern myself with this.
You
were just telling me the news. That's right. Okay. I can accept that. Thank you for telling me the news. I don't even have to react.
Right.
Now that I think about it.
Anyway.
Yes.
That's it for me.
Okay.
That's all I have to say.
That's
all I have to say about that.
That
as far
is
as counts to say.
Okay. That's it's weekend time now, so you can start to relax. We'll see how things develop over this coming weekend. There'll be more to review on Monday as the protest scene morphs.
So Congress isn't going to do anything I can ask you about.
Oh, well.
But boy, all this procedure stuff that we, meaning me, keeps bringing up, it comes back to actually be put in place and matter. It's just really interesting.
It is.
Motion to recommit.
Yeah.
The fact of the matter is,
I find it interesting. I agree. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, you have to, if you really want to understand Congress, you have to watch Schoolhouse Rock and Monty Python's Holy Grail. If you haven't seen these things, you won't understand what's going on.
It's true. There's a real element of that to it. And that sounds facetious, but it really isn't. And if you watch C-SPAN, as difficult as that can be to do, I mean, first of all, if you want to learn to empathize with Trump in court, watch C-SPAN. It will happen to you too. You'll start nodding off, but you'll start to, what you have to do is watch C-SPAN and imagine what would happen if all the things that they brush by quickly, in between gavel poundings, were objected to, or somebody said, no, I don't think that's right, or I want to vote on that, or I'm not going to do it. Those are the different points at which the process can be disrupted. You need to start asking those questions. What if you're just a stick in the mud and you don't want to allow things to go forward? How do they get around you?
Hey, I just came across this Washington Post story, which I thought was interesting because it combines two of our themes. You know how Trump is upset that RFK is on conservative media?
Yeah, I do know that.
He's upset that Marjorie Taylor Greene is trying to vacate the chair.
Yes.
We are trying to snatch defeat out of the jaws of victory by making the story Republican infighting, said the person who, like others, spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss Trump's thinking.
Oh, well, that's a silly thing to try to do anyway, but all right.
He doesn't like it. He doesn't like the spotlight being on Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Yeah, even though she considers herself a super fan.
Well, first of all, he doesn't like the spotlight on anybody who's not him. And secondly, he doesn't like the spotlight on anybody who's raising money that isn't his.
Yes. Right. And she may or may not be contributing. It's funny. She might think she's such a super fan, and it's all well known that she doesn't have to do the kick-up scheme that they devised. And he doesn't know how to make her do that because there was never any ability to make her do it.
Greene's move has also frustrated top advisors to former President Donald Trump, and one person said Trump has repeatedly described the Republican fighting as embarrassing. He wishes it would just go away. Well, his advisors believe the situation puts Trump in the difficult bind of choosing between allies, between Gaetz and Greene, for example, and is furthermore unnecessary in the middle of an election year when they want to be talking about immigration, inflation, campus protest, and other issues they view as more favorable.
Yes.
Which is, true. I mean, campaigns want to talk about the issues that they're, strong about.
Yeah.
Democrats want to talk about all these Arizona abortion type laws. And Republicans want to talk about campus protests.
Yes.
Because they think it helps them. I'm not sure why. But
I don't know either, but logic doesn't apply.
Logic doesn't apply here
either.
Exactly.
Like yesterday's debate, the House apparently passed a bill with bipartisan support, and largely because people are coming at it from 50,000 different angles because it's such a dumb bill that you can't unify anybody on it. But the idea of codifying sort of a definition of anti-Semitism. But
in order to make it criminal,
right?
I mean,
essentially, this is a Republican-sponsored bill to try to cobble together a way to crack heads at the protests and to label them as officially anti-Semitic because people are quibbling. Now we'll define it by law, and it's troubling because there are Democrats who are used to saying, "Yeah, we want to protect people from anti-Semitism," right? That's bad, but equally bad is anti-Semitism now being defined by, white Christian nationalists who want to use it for a very different end. And, of course, having anti-Semitism is now being defined by people who 6 months ago were the sort of people who felt comfortable saying, "What? I don't understand. All I said was you people are good with money. That's a compliment." That's anti-Semitism, sir. What? No. And now they're defining it in ways that help them beat up students, not actually protect anyone from anti-Semitism. And apparently among the Democrats who were asked to go along with this bill, and there were many of them who did, but the vast majority of Jewish members of Congress said, "I actually think we'd be better off not having Christian nationalists define anti-Semitism right now. Thank you," and voted no on it. But also, Marjorie Taylor Greene and a few other weirdos from the Freedom Caucus also voted no on this Republican initiative. And then just to compound the weirdness of it, Marjorie Taylor Greene's comment of it was, "I'm voting no against this bill defining anti-Semitism because it would allow you to call people who believe that the Jews killed Jesus are anti-Semitic. And everybody knows the Jews killed Jesus." Holy mackerel. Wow. And you can see why, I'm sure even in
how is this
Trump headquarters, he's like, "Hold on a second. This is actually not terrific."
Yep.
Sheldon Adelson, my good friend.
It's not going to become law, and that's what happens with messaging bills. And then
what
it's a 24-hour story. It's a mess bill, is what it is.
Yeah, and
But I have to change the topic. And
okay,
give you this
you got a minute.
Hot off the presses poll that just came out.
All right,
from Change Research, very important poll. Dolly Parton favorability.
Oh,
favorable 78, unfavorable 3. And people on Twitter want to know what percentage of the country is named Jolene.
That may answer it.
That would be the answer.
I feel that she's overstepped her bounds, this Dolly person. All right. Well, that's a unique approach to it. Is this just testing to be sure that we're getting real answers here? Like, I'm not a bot? How do you feel about Dolly Parton?
I don't know.
Why are they polling that?
I don't know.
She has no plans.
2745, so they got a bunch of people to respond. And I think that's about the right percentage.
Sure.
You know? Mm-hmm. Did you know that Willie Nelson is in his 90s? It's amazing.
He has been for several years.
I mentioned this to Willie
now,
Nelson
think,
and Dolly
right?
Parton are on the new Cowboy Carter album by Beyonce.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, and hey, you know what I'm not seeing is a lot of polling responses saying, Willie Nelson, he's too old.
Yeah, exactly right.
And yet, very popular. Okay. Well, thank you. That I had not known. I didn't know that anybody was going to be doing polling on Dolly Parton, but why not?
Why not?
Might as well.
Anyway, that's it.
Very good.
Bye. See you
okay.
Monday.
Sure. We'll see you then and catch up with what
Maybe
develops.
Congress will have done something.
No. Well, that's impossible. They won't be here. They're going to be home complaining about student protests. That's what will change over the next couple of days. Oh, and maybe, I guess, contempt of court. Definitely have to keep an eye on that. Trump will fall asleep a couple more times. And, all right. Thank you. You set it up nicely. I think we know what to watch. Eyes should be turning to the courtroom. But don't forget about the protests. And they won't let you over the weekend, I'm sure.
All righty. Take care.
Very good. You do the same. And I'll continue talking about that. I did want to make mention of it. And you can feel free. Because we're almost right up against the break anyway. If you want to wait for the music, that's certainly fine. I was thinking, though, lots of additional commentary comparing the response at Columbia to other schools. And I think overnight Wesleyan University, I think I have it right, adopting a sort of the wait-and-see approach and saying we won't be enforcing the rules, though we do declare the students at the encampment at our university to be in violation of university rules. They are aware of this, but we're not going to move to disperse them, and people pointing to it and saying, well, this is the way. Why isn't everybody doing this? Although the more I think about what happened at Columbia University, I mean, I don't love it. It was not a great answer, but they definitely had some unique circumstances going on there. And it really, I don't know. It wasn't why now it occurs to me for some reason, but I don't know. It never occurred to me before that the president of Columbia University, reminder, is Minouche Shafik. And it might make you think, oh, wouldn't it be, that sounds like you could be in a unique position there dealing with a Palestinian protest as the first female Muslim, Egyptian-born, by the way, Muslim president of Columbia. And in this atmosphere, that's tough. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Shoo, we made it to the other side here. Yes, as I was saying as we were going into the break, some of you listening live may or may not have been able to hear the last couple seconds of commentary, but it occurs to me that the president of Columbia is known as Minouche, but Nimat, I guess, is her first name, Minouche Shafik. And it gave me pause. Say, that sounds, quite frankly, like perhaps she may even be Muslim. Whether she's a practicing religious Muslim, I have no idea. But yes, she's actually born in Egypt. And, I mean, an international person by all measures, and lived all over the world, and Western educated, et cetera, so not at all out of place among the Ivy League intelligentsia and the usual source for international participation in Western intelligentsia, to be sure. But yeah, that too, a unique position to be put in. And in addition to, of course, the difficulty that they had with that one student who was already involved in disciplinary hearings months before this protest began, but involved in disciplinary hearings over I guess we have to still say at this point, allegedly anti-Semitic comments. And they were fairly significant and fairly troubling and unambiguous. Even though the student defended himself, as you know, that's what students will do. But in these comments made in the middle of disciplinary hearings, so that there was no doubt about the fact that he was standing by his position, and it left the university in a very difficult position. You know, they take it very seriously when they have to think about, do we need to expel a student or even just discipline a student? Because it can have a profound impact on them. It can have a profound impact on their lives, their careers, etc. They want to do this very carefully. And while there was no attention focused on campuses over anything in particular until these protests began to manifest, then they found their hand forced, essentially, right? We got to do something about this when all of this broke out into the open. But before he began leading this protest, he was just a student going through disciplinary procedures, and there were no real eyes on him. And so they took a very cautious approach, for which they'll get zero credit now that they have cracked down on their protesters, of course. But just thinking for a moment about being in the position of having a pro-Palestinian activist student who takes a leadership role at this encampment, leads their initial press conferences announcing the encampment and its purposes and making the demands, and being reminded, this kid is already on your radar as a disciplinary question mark. We're very worried about what this kid will progress to, given the nature of the statements that he's made in the past. And we've been taking a wait and see attitude, but we're a little bit worried about the possibility of him acting out. If he actually acts out on his statements, we're going to have huge liability issues. If he hurts anybody, we're doomed. We've been sitting on these statements where he's advocated for the death of Zionists for 3 months, because we want to be gentle with the discipline with our students. But now we have Congress coming down like a ton of bricks on Ivy League college presidents. They're targeting college presidents. And in the middle of all of this, of course, it's happening in New York City. The mayor not at all sympathetic to the situation and looking to be, a quasi-Republican in all of this. That's not helpful. The New York City police force, never helpful with all these things. And then say to all of this, in the atmosphere in which we're dealing with this, with Congress targeting people, like Republicans in Congress in particular, targeting people as the leaders of anti-Semitic campuses, allegedly. And to be asked to handle this as a Muslim woman. And, of course, to have to deal with the protesters who might be looking to you thinking you'll be sympathetic to them because you're a Muslim woman, or perhaps thinking of you as a sellout because you're not sympathetic to them even though you're a Muslim woman. It's an extraordinarily difficult position to be in, and it's very likely that you would handle it if without putting a value judgment on it, just because I don't know what to do with it. Does it help any of you for me to put a value judgment on it? I don't think so. But without doing that, just say it feels difficult, and it feels very different than it might with, like I said, if the mayor of New York City, A, is Eric effing Adams for one thing, and two, it's the mayor of New York City. That's different than having the mayor of Middlebury, Connecticut looking over your shoulder. Different from having the mayor of Providence, Rhode Island looking over your shoulder. But also those mayors are different, and they're likely to respond to the atmosphere created by Republicans in Congress very differently than Eric effing Adams will. And also, it's very difficult to get people to turn their attention to, nationally, what's happening at Wesleyan University or Brown University for that matter, versus what's happening at Columbia. Although, as between Brown and Columbia, it's a closer call, except that ultimately New York City, still a bigger place with more media spotlight than Providence, Rhode Island, period. That's it. Does it excuse the choices made? Different question. It just makes it easier to understand that the Columbia pressure cooker was and is a lot different than the combination of circumstances at other locations. It doesn't explain everything. There are other bigger universities that have not done things and handled things differently, but New York City is always sort of in a class by itself. And being Minouche Shafik in the middle of all of this feels like it adds an extra element. Just kind of, it's a good exercise for us here in our little enclosed environment to say, let me give some thought to that. I could see how that might change things. I still disagree. That's totally valid. I still think it should have been handled differently. I still think she should have shown courage for this, that, or the other thing. Possible, but not and she may not be your ideal person. But again, I don't know. And it ends up paralyzing me in the end because they say, well, once you allow for the fact that, different people, different campuses, different cities, different circumstances, kids under the disciplinary gaze, kids not under the disciplinary gaze, reactionaries who fight against the encampment or not. All of these things are different, and I guess in the end, you can't be surprised that there's different reactions and different responses from the students at different places at different times with different people involved under different circumstances. But then everything becomes relative and there's nothing left to talk about. So you can't quite dismiss it all that way, but realize that because you found a university where they took a different approach doesn't mean that approach will work at every other encampment. It certainly can't work until you try it at every other encampment, but it's not a one-size-fits-all situation, and sometimes people will have outside pressures that force them to do things that they don't want to do, and others, there will be no pressure whatsoever. They simply wanted to from the beginning. I mean, I don't know anything much about Minouche Shafik, but I assume she's motivated by different things than Greg Abbott, for instance, who can order certain things to happen at a University of Texas that no politician can order directly at Columbia University. I imagine different things motivate them. Greg Abbott wants to crack heads. I'm thinking maybe Minouche Shafik doesn't, but I don't know for sure. But it feels like that there's more possibility that she didn't, but found that there were circumstances that forced her hand. I want to consider that possibility. All right. But it's beyond our ability to really get an answer because we're just not going to get one from President Shafik, probably, until well after this is over. Maybe in exit interviews later on, we'll get a better picture. Someone will write a book about what the dynamics really were. And then we won't read the book. But, the point is, I don't know. There's different ways of thinking about all of this. And there are different things to think about as well. As I mentioned when we talked about it with Greg, the weird dynamics behind what's happening among Republicans in the House is becoming an issue. Let me see if we can't race through this Bloomberg piece about it. GOP hardliners to force vote on removing Speaker Johnson. They think they're going to force a vote, but will they be able to? They may not understand what they are actually able to do. But likewise, remember that other members of the House may not really understand exactly what their options are to avoid such a vote, and so therefore it may be entirely avoidable, as Matt Glassman points out, but they yet may not avoid it because they just don't know. Anyway, GOP hardliners to try, anyhow, to force a vote on removing Johnson. This, again, in Bloomberg, which means we get bullet points up top. House Democrats are expected to save Johnson's speakership. We'll see. If you annoy Democrats by having this vote happen over and over again, they might just say, well, we understand that we've concluded business for this Congress. There's just not going to be anything else passing in this place. So to hell with it. I'm tired of having this vote. Let's just get rid of the guy. But not today. Johnson, of course, though, worked with Democrats on Ukraine aid and spending deals, and so they might, in fact, be favorably inclined. And there's the bonus of frustrating Marjorie Taylor Greene by doing this. So let's see. What's the news here? Christian Hall, Billy House, and Eric Wasson, I don't know how you pronounce it, Wasson, has got this piece here. Am I able to read this thing in the pocket version? I'll have to go and click back and see if they'll let me read through it here. A whole whopping two Republican hardliners announced on Wednesday, that's yesterday, that they will force a vote, or they think they'll try to force a vote, I would say, on ousting House Speaker Mike Johnson, a battle they are virtually certain to lose while inflaming ideological animosity in a bitterly divided party. Hooray! House Democratic leaders promised a day earlier to join Johnson's Republican allies in a parliamentary maneuver to block the effort to remove the speaker, providing him with sufficient numbers to quash the revolt. So, well, you know what? We'll leave it at that. Essentially, though, the procedure is she'll insist that she has a privileged resolution at the desk, and they may even agree and allow there to be an hour of debate, half an hour of which will be assigned to her, half an hour assigned to an opponent of the bill. They may or may not claim the half hour. They'll whine and scream and complain for a while, and then at the conclusion of debate, normally what happens then, an opponent to the motion to vacate the chair will stand and say, I move to table the motion, and then they'll vote on that. But like Matt was pointing out, I guess, you can just say, well, I move to table it, and just say we'll have a voice vote on tabling it, and say the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and that's it. And Marjorie Taylor Greene will say, I want a recorded vote. One or two things can happen there, too. One, they can just pretend they don't hear her. But two, if they want to allow her to be heard, say she asked for a recorded vote. Again, C-SPAN watchers will recognize what happens next. The person in the chair, whether it's the speaker or someone, it'll probably be someone else. He won't dignify the proceedings this way, but some other speaker pro tem will be there and say, all those in favor of a recorded vote will rise and remain standing until counted, and then they'll count, and I forget what the threshold is, but ordinarily they don't have a difficult time coming up with the requisite number of votes in favor of holding a recorded vote. But, some small percentage. The number is out there. I don't remember it offhand. Others will. It doesn't take very much. But with only 2 or 3 members in favor of vacating the chair at this point, it's entirely possible that the chair will just say, an insufficient number having arisen, or that no recorded vote will be required. The voice vote stands and the motion is tabled, or the motion to table is agreed to, or something like that, whatever they need to do, however they want to call it. But, and they can appeal that, and they can table the appeal. In other words, she could be left banging her head against the wall, and there really be very little that they could do about it. Matt Glassman also pointing out that you could just dispute the propriety of bringing this motion up now, this resolution. It's who says that we're going to bring this motion up for consideration? I say we don't. Let's have a vote on that. And you can have a voice vote on that and decide that the majority of the House has said we don't want to consider this thing. Like a motion to, they actually have an overt motion to consider, motion for consideration in the Senate. And it's on the books in the House. They can do the same thing. They just usually have that decided ahead of time by the majority leader, who has the proxies of a majority of the House. It's a difficult question now with a 1-vote majority, but generally speaking, they are pretty sure they can muster that. But again, as I said, you want to figure out what's possible in the House, just watch C-SPAN and imagine someone being a stick in the mud and saying, no, I demand that you demonstrate to me that we have the will of the majority to do this thing. Show me. Don't just make me assume it. Okay, well, it'll make for interesting viewing, to say the least. All right, let's see other things that we have tucked away here in preparation for the day. Let's see. Some of these things are links to social media that, here's the Marjorie Taylor Greene insistence that she was voting against the anti-Semitism bill because it would make her into an anti-Semite, because she professes to believe that it was the Jews that killed Jesus. Everybody knows it, and it says so in Scripture, she says. People dispute that. But anyway, what an odd way of standing on principle. Gee whiz. Anyway, yeah, so this new bill will cause problems for people. It hopefully won't actually, go anywhere. I imagine the Senate would be loath to consider such a thing, but you never know. It did have bipartisan support, which is a little scary and dangerous. And not loving the idea of letting the white Christian nationalists decide that anybody that doesn't agree with them is now anti-Semitic, including all you Jews. And of course, to have the Jewish space laser people deciding this doesn't help either. And inevitably leads to weirdness that we just don't want to really consider. Okay, let's see. Other things that we wanted to discuss. Oh, yeah, here's an interesting thing. Alongside the very dumb thing that the New York Times was publishing this morning, we also have this, what might be a very interesting review, although I don't think we're going to get through it here because they might have been talking to, this might be a huge read. It's hard to tell from this splash page that you land on. The exit interviews. Have you seen this thing? 12 departing lawmakers tell us what Congress is really like. I have my doubts about how frank they're going to be on all fronts, but I think it'll probably be pretty revealing. Just to let you know what it says here, the intro here says, even the insiders are fed up with Washington. To understand why, we put the same 8 questions to House and Senate members in both parties who are on the way out, looking for patterns and prescriptions to get a handle on the place. Corruption, money, perks, frustrations, solutions. Hear what they said about it all in this roundup of their... All right, well, I don't know who they talked to. There's a list here somewhere. They're running through it here in video format. And I guess I'll call out the names as quickly as I can. I might have to pause everything. Let's see. Representative Larry Bucshon, Bucshon, a Republican of Indiana. And his poll quote here, Congress is absolutely not corrupt. Okay. Representative Doug Lamborn, Republican of Colorado, saying, no, I don't see the corruption. Let's see. Representative Tony Cardenas, if the accent is in the right place here, Democrat of California, saying both Democrats and Republicans, by and large, what? They're just trying to do what we believe we need to do. So, no surprise, members of Congress do not see Congress as inherently corrupt, even though they're leaving. And that's generally what you would expect people to say. Although sometimes you think that in their exit interview, they would be free to admit what they would otherwise never admit to. But as it turns out, it's less frequently corruption and more frequently petty jealousies that run things. Anyway, let's see who else is on the list here. Ben Cardin, Democratic Senator of Maryland, giving his exit interview here. Representative Earl Blumenauer, long-serving member Democrat from Oregon. Representative Grace Napolitano, Democrat of California, also been around for some time here. And Representative John Sarbanes of Maryland. I didn't realize he was on his way out, too. But longtime political family. He didn't serve quite as long as I thought we might see based on his father's service, Paul Sarbanes. Right. Ken Buck, of course, we've discussed in the past, and he, I guess, already out, right? Did he go already, or is he hanging on for the end? Republican of Colorado there. Let's see. He's a little bit more open about, or what he likes to call, the corruption here. Back to John Sarbanes. Let's see. Representative Derek Kilmer, Democrat of Washington. Then back to Ken Buck again. So point, counterpoint, I guess. Well, interesting commentary being made here. Anyway, Ken Buck is getting an awful lot of screen time, but because it's funny. This is a big super cut, I guess they call it, video of all of the interviews, and you get a second or two on screen of various others saying, I just don't see it. I mean, I don't see it as corruption. It didn't really strike me that way. It's just not like what people think. get 1 second to say it. Ken Buck, though, is saying, no, corruption all over the place. And he's got like a minute of screen time to make his case. I guess they really wanted to push that side. Let's see. It's still running here, this video. Anyway, we'll cut out of this at this point. And do you want to know what the questions that they asked people were? So we have, what's one word you would use to describe Congress today? One word. That's helpful. Is Congress corrupt? In case you didn't use that word. Right? What's one word you would use to describe Congress today? I notice you didn't say corrupt. Would you please answer the question this way? Is Congress corrupt? What was your most frustrating experience? What's the best perk of the job? Did you make a difference? What should a Congress member's salary be? And there's two more. What worries you the most about the future? And how do you fix Congress? We ask the people who are not sticking around to fix Congress. It's somewhat interesting to see what they have to say in terms of the corruption thing. I guess I want to look at the is Congress corrupt question, if I can. Is it gonna show me? Apparently not. What is this? Is this all it is? Is this supercut here and not, you're not gonna like show me somewhere the print share a full article? Why? I don't know. I can't scroll for some reason. This is just very odd. I imagine, let's see, if I cut and paste it, will it take me to what a weird thing. The layout is just wrong. Oh, okay. Oh, I see. I'm not logged into an account. All right. Well, you know what? Never mind. It's out there. It's a thing that you can discuss. Quite honestly, I don't know what I'm going to learn from these interviews. I don't think they're going to be all that frank. Although occasionally I think the corruption question looks to be eliciting an interesting response from Ken Buck, who's talking about things like, look, it was made clear to me inside of the Republican conference that if I wanted to be on these very influential committees that I was hoping to serve on, I had to raise a certain amount of money for the Republican Party. And that's true. And it's I'm fairly certain it's true in the Democratic caucus as well, that they basically say, well, if you want to be on one of the big exclusive committees, you want to be on Ways and Means, you want to be on, I don't know, the Judiciary Committee sort of has become something like that, although in the House, it's not really the same. But, Energy and Commerce is a very influential committee. The committees that influence a lot of legislation, they say, well, we don't just give this to anybody. There's a seniority thing. There's kind of a waiting list for people who get on there. If you're a first, second, third termer, you're expected to sort of cut your teeth on less spotlight committees. Still important. Transportation and infrastructure, foreign affairs, what have you. Things where you can learn the system, small business, etc., before you get a seat on one of the big, at one of the big tables. But in addition, you also kind of have to show your fundraising prowess, which at first glance is like, well, is this just a bribe? I have to give $25,000 a year to the party committee in order to prove that I'm worthy of being included in this decision-making process? Well, that's one way of looking at it. Of course, another way of looking at it is when you get onto one of these committees, the Ways and Means Committee. Well, let me ask you, what's your reason for wanting to be on the Ways and Means Committee? I just love tax policy. I want to write tax policy. I have no interest other than an academic interest in tax policy. Well, is that the case, or do you recognize that because tax policy is so important and there's so much money at stake in tax policy, or whatever issue area of policy, that you understand that there will be lobbyists who will want to spend lots of money on campaign contributions for people who they think will be helpful on those issues, and that by getting on the House Ways and Means Committee, by getting on Energy and Commerce Committee, whatever it is that interests you, you open up new avenues to raise lots of money for yourself, which is true. And very often the reason why people want to get it. And then I can be a member forever because I'll have a huge war chest. Well, in that light, does it make any more sense, for instance, that the party who would agree to place you there and put you in a position to raise tremendous amounts of money from people who have tremendous amounts of money to spend to, to put it as boldly as possible, kick some of that back? If we give you the opportunity to start up this tremendous fundraising machine, don't you think that maybe you have some obligation to put some more of that back into the party that made it possible for you to be there in the first place? Well, viewed that way, at a minimum, you say, everybody has their hands in the pie here. I don't know if it's really all about corruption so much as a bit of a cynical system, but I think I like it out in the open more than hidden. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. So I figured out what it's just an odd structure, what this New York Times entry is actually all about. It's entirely video. There's no print section of it, no print version of it. Each one of these supercut videos is the members who they have gotten to sit down to answer questions, answering those questions. If you click on each of the different questions, the video resets, and it's the same people answering those questions over and over. And I have the sound off, and it looks like I'm just seeing the same video over and over again. But in fact, they are different supercut videos. So, yeah, and it is Ken Buck describing what, he views as corruption here. And there's a lot of differing opinions. So there's certain people saying, no, I don't think it's corruption. And then others saying, well, it's a form of corruption. But there's definitely some undue influence for, say, large corporations and big donors, etc. Then Ken Buck describing this system in a very interesting way, but like we were just mentioning, not everybody would view it in the same way. I mean, but I get your point that if you view it from just one side, one angle, here he's saying the tsunami of money that comes in from special interest groups, I assume he's going to say, and then Sarbanes chiming in saying that's a form of corruption, there's no question, and a few others. And then Buck says, I was told at the beginning that I had to raise $250,000, not $25,000, $250,000. And if I wanted to be on certain committees, what I should be doing, I guess, is maybe I should be playing his voice reading it. But anyway, I had to raise $250,000 if I wanted to be on certain committees. And if I wanted to be on more important committees or committees with broader jurisdiction, I needed to raise even more money. Buying a committee seat is not something that most Americans know that members of Congress have to do. Yes, that's true. Most Americans probably don't imagine that that's the case. And it's easy to make the case that it might be a form of corruption. True. But yeah, it's also sort of interesting that the viewpoint, if you look at it just differently, the viewpoint of, well, if I'm on this committee and people want to give me so much money that I'll have $250,000 to spare to give to the party and have $1 million to run on for my next reelection, if that comes to me as a result of being on that committee, do I not have an obligation to sort of uphold the party system that put me there? Because, I mean, I guess like you would ask a guy like that, well, why, you might tend to agree, well, why should you be buying your committee seat? Look, as a member of Congress, that's your job, is to be on committees and consider this legislation. Sure, but small business legislation needs to be considered too. Transportation stuff needs to be considered too. Agriculture stuff needs to be considered too. And there are special interests that participate in those things for sure. But there's definitely places that there's like no money involved. There needs to be an ethics committee, even though they hardly ever do anything. And nobody contributes to that. So here's the question. Are you buying the committee seat or what? Are they buying you? I don't know. Does anybody think, for instance, that Ken Buck, if he's suddenly finds himself on the Ways and Means Committee, and he's pulling in $2 million in donations annually, does anybody think, well, that's because of the special genius of Ken Buck? He's brilliant. That guy is running America. Everybody wants a piece of that guy because he's a genius. Or is it, I don't know, what can I tell you? He's a suit that occupies one of those seats, and if we give him enough money, we'll get the votes to go the way we want them to go in the House Ways and Means Committee, and that means a tax windfall for us. That's what's happening. And when $2 million lands on your lap and the party says, we granted you the right to be on this committee. I mean, don't forget, you're nominated to this committee by our party's steering committee. Our party commits to voting for you to take that seat on the floor. That is to say, we're going to go to the floor with a resolution that names you specifically to this committee. It names lots of other people to specifically other committees too. Nothing special about you, but it requires action on the House floor to put you there. And it works because the party holds together as a party and votes as the majority party to put you there. That's how this works. You don't get that seat unless everyone else in this party stands behind you and everybody else for their assignments to be in those seats. You're there because we put you there. It costs money to be able to do that. You're going to have to help pay to maintain that system. And that system will kick money back to you if you're in trouble and you find yourself in a close race. There will be money from the NRCC that shows up to rescue you at some point because you put some of that money aside early on. Or it'll go to rescue somebody else who is in trouble and not in a position to call on traditional donors to the House Ways and Means Committee to bail them out because he or she is in their first or second term and they're stuck in the backwater committees serving in places where there's not a tremendous amount of money. Why do you think there's not a tremendous amount of money in the small business committees? Because the businesses are small. That's why. And, it's not a lucrative place to be. Who gets put there? People who don't have the clout to be put elsewhere, or who haven't proven that they can create the clout by going out there and hustling and raising the money. It's a kind of a brutal system, but it does make a certain amount of sense at a certain level. And it's interesting to frame yourself as an anti-corruption crusader when it could easily be viewed as, well, these people started donating millions and millions of dollars to me, and I would like to be able to take personal advantage and keep those millions and millions of dollars or use it the way I want to and have no obligation to the people who put their careers on the line to put me in a position where I could raise that money. I raised it and now it's mine. It's very Republican, but it's not necessarily all that anti-corruption, if you ask me. I don't know. I see it in a very different light, I think. But I do understand that is a form of corruption, yes, and I see no way around it. And I don't know. But leave it to the Republicans to be the ones that are most offended by the communitarian aspects. The one communitarian aspect that Republicans actually retained, this one disturbs him greatly and is viewed as corruption. Ken Buck is no hero, that's for sure. I'm glad he stood up against some of these Trumpists, certainly. But golly, there are some differences that we still have with him. Okay. Let's see. Here's some comments coming in via email in the midst of the show. Let's see. Mo Smith commenting here that, yes, school is ending, so protests will die down. But, of course, the Democratic National Convention is right around the corner. I'm not old enough to remember 1968, but I hear tell that it was bad. And, of course, it was in Chicago, and so will it be this year as well. There will no doubt be protest at the convention, but it'll be interesting to see whether it's students doing the protesting or others. And if the encampments continue over the summer at those campuses, will they break camp and move to Chicago or will they not? That I'm not sure about. Of course, Chicago, not a difficult logistical endeavor to be reached by the very large Muslim and Arab American populations in Michigan, for instance. And many of them will, of course, be among the delegates to the convention. There will almost certainly be protest action there. That's true. But then again, that too, the convention itself adjourns at some point, and while it's a short race from there to election day, there will be a period of months in which there's no encampment outside the convention. And so long as they can keep things relatively peaceful there, I guess that inures or could potentially inure to their benefit. But certainly, you could see reaction provoked, possibly even intentionally, in ways that reflect rather poorly. And I think you do need to have an eye out for that. That's for sure. Especially given what just happened at UCLA. It would be in the interest of, any number of parties whom we do not favor, whether it's Republicans, as distinct from Trumpians, or Russians for that matter, or it's just straight up, Palestinian supporters who say, not my job to worry about who gets elected president, but rather to advocate for the rights of Palestinians and let the chips fall where they may. And as between the 3, 4, 5 factions that we can think of who might have an interest either in escalating to violence, and that I guess should not be understood to include the protesters themselves, but they may be unafraid of the fact that it might escalate to violence and say that too is not our responsibility, but we can't not protest because there's a threat that someone else will escalate to violence. That's what they want us to do, and then we don't get to speak out. So they'll contribute from one end by saying we will be there to be targeted, knowing that we could be targeted. And then, of course, the real problem, which would be the people who say, we will create misery and problems for everyone by initiating violence, which is the wrong approach in almost every situation. But there you have it. But definitely true, something to consider. It's not as quiet as non-election year summers are. An election year summer is a noisy affair. almost always. Okay, let's see. A couple of other things that I had parked in pocket here for consideration on different subjects, but I'm thinking about should I scroll back and see what's been waiting in the wings? And there's a lot, to say the least. And maybe it's worth bringing some of them out now at this point. Well, let's see. Without going too far back, just a totally different subject, but a fascinating examination just of something that looks like just as everything else in many other areas, everything old is new again, and we're finding repeating patterns. In fact, yesterday, as news broke of the consideration in the House of this weird anti-Semitism bill, discussion on the news networks by right-leaning commentators, and I think in this case was it Dana Bash who made this comment on CNN? I don't know if I want to. I'll have to look back and see if I can find it so that I attribute it correctly, because you don't want to be tagged with this thing if it's not you. But I just thought it was a weird formulation that was coming out both about the protests and then about the need for this anti-Semitism bill, or alleged need for it. Here we go. Yeah, Dana Bash, we got it right here. On social media, I guess, as well as discussing it on air, saying, commenting on the protests and saying, destruction, violence, and hate overtake college campuses across the country, with Jewish students feeling unsafe at their own schools. It is unacceptable, and hearkening back to the 1930s in Europe. Our Inside Politics show open here. So she then went on the air to voice the same opinion. And it struck me that we were once again back at something old being new again. We're back to like the stupid Jonah Goldberg supposition that there's such a thing as liberal fascism. Remember that stupid book that earned him so much opprobrium? And then, of course, he tried to redeem himself as becoming an anti-Trumper. But now, thanks a lot, he's brought back, the real Nazis are the liberals. Yeah, that's exactly it. Unite the Right. They're marching through Charlottesville and the University of Virginia campus, by the way, with tiki torches and actual Nazi flags at their march the next day. But it's the lefties bringing back 1930s Germany. Sure. Okay. Sure. Let's, I don't know. But we've come back around to that cycle again. And, that strikes me as, I don't know, similar to something that I had queued up here. Another go round of a similar MO. This one from Media Matters, a study they're citing here in this piece, saying that Tradwife, that is traditional wife influencers, are quietly spreading far-right conspiracy theories. Now, the Tradwife thing here has also been treated with the usual interest and clarity from Amanda Marcotte, among others, several times. And it's a weird genre of online influencers. You know, I think you can probably guess from the label, Tradwife. But I'm sure Media Matters writer here, Olivia Little, will describe what they're about. But when I say things coming around full circle again, it reminded me that it was only maybe a couple of years ago that another weird genre of online influencer was doing the same thing, quietly spreading far-right conspiracy theories. Before, it was like health and wellness influencers. Oh, well, natural products, organic foods, and by the way, don't take any vaccines, for instance, stuff like that. Or the original, maybe not original, but I don't know, in this latest go-round, last couple of years, last decade or so, when we read extensively a few years ago about how Steve Bannon decided that that the gaming community was exploitable in the same way, and that they too could be used to disseminate far-right conspiracy theories. Now we have the traditional wives doing that, which, interestingly, I mean, the traditional wife probably said, my little head can't understand politics, and so didn't involve herself in these things. But now suddenly they find it's to their political advantage to do so, or someone's, I don't know, sponsoring them to do so, or they got into this gig specifically to be able to find new cover to spread conspiracy theories. I don't know. We'll see what they have to say about it. But it reminds me that, yes, that's the insidious genius of some of these social media platforms where people subscribe and watch YouTubers and TikTokers, etc., using the platform to just using the platform's algorithm to continue to reinforce this stuff and to offer influence well beyond what they say on the surface they're offering. Here's the study and the write-up of it from Olivia Little. A Media Matters analysis found interacting with Tradwife videos on TikTok led to a deluge of conspiratorial content. Not that surprising. That's what those things are built for. TikTok's For You page recommendation algorithm propels users who interact with Tradwife content, which promotes traditional values and rigid gender roles, down far-right conspiracy theory rabbit holes. Media Matters coded and analyzed 327 recommended videos after exclusively interacting with Tradwife content and documented what happened. We found TikTok's recommendation algorithm rapidly populated our FYP, For You page, with conspiracy theory content and fear-mongering, which made up nearly 1/3 of all videos served to the FYP. Now, on the background of the situation, in recent years, the Tradwife movement has shifted from far-right internet subculture to mainstream social media trend, becoming particularly popular among young people, which seems odd, but there it is. There's some links to some data on that. Not every popular homemaking creator is a Tradwife, though. Tradwife influencers specifically preach the gospel of rigid gender roles and biblical submissiveness, glamorizing a 1950s housewife aesthetic, while calling for some variation of a return to tradition. To be considered a Tradwife influencer, according to our criteria, a creator had to have a minimum of 20,000 followers, self-identify as a Tradwife, explicitly promote traditional gender roles, and primarily dedicate their account to promoting homemaking and traditional values. That in quotes, of course. Media Matters identified 7 accounts that fulfilled this criteria, then liked and watched each account's 10 most recent videos. The key findings. Some bullet points here. After we interacted with Tradwife content, TikTok's recommendation algorithm began flooding our FYP with right-wing conspiracy theory content. Our FYP also began displaying medical misinformation and anti-government content, specifically fear-mongering about the need to prepare for an impending civil war. That seems traditional, right? I'm just a traditional homemaker. Civil war! Of the 327 videos served to the For You page in Media Matters analysis, 100, or 30.6%, contained conspiracy theories or apocalyptic fear-mongering, not just how to bake a chicken. Trends in TikTok's For You page narratives following engagement with Tradwife content. There is a chart here that shows, amazingly, increases across the board in all the different categories. That is to say, far-right figures and talking points, general Tradwife content is also in among there, anti-government content, homesteading, medical misinformation, misogynistic content, some of which people would say is right there in the videos, racism and white supremacy, or Christian nationalism, and then one spiky thing that includes, I don't know, this one's just literally almost off the charts, that spikes well above the increases of everything else, conspiracy theory and apocalyptic fear-mongering. Now, to those unfamiliar with Tradwife influencer ecosystems, these may be unexpected or confusing results. Why would interaction with Tradwife content, which is often filled with beautiful imagery of gardening and baking, funnel a user down a conspiracy theory rabbit hole? Well, we discovered that many popular Tradwife creators are quietly couching far-right conspiracy theories between videos of bread baking and milkmaid dresses. Nearly every Tradwife influencer we identified pushed baseless right-wing conspiracy theories and right-wing talking points, often focusing on a general distrust of the government and modern medicine. These messages were positioned between soft visuals of baking, gardening, and modest fashion. Tradwife influencer Jasmine Dinis, D-I-N-I-S, typifies this phenomenon. In one TikTok video, we see Dinis drinking coffee on her porch with overlaid text reading, "Being a real rebel in 2024 is..." And then several baking and gardening clips follow under more superimposed text that answers, "Taking sovereignty over your own health and food sources and not relying on the government for either." Yeah. Okay, I mean, whatever. Dinis has uploaded a number of videos with similar messaging using hashtags such as conspiracy, raw milk, and off-grid. You're real off-grid, TikTok. Okay. Her account on Twitter is more overtly extreme, with posts suggesting that the sun does not cause skin cancer. Defending Andrew Tate, of course, he a self-proclaimed misogynist, on trial right now in Romania for human trafficking, rape, and forming a criminal group to sexually exploit women. All good traditional stuff, I guess. I mean, I guess it is. And blaming his arrest on The Matrix. And, of course, describing a worldwide pride festival as, quote, full of mentally ill people and groomers, unquote. Except, of course, being an influencer of any kind is really about being a groomer. Just this time about being a submissive groomer, which is kind of exactly what that is. I mean, there's not that many other kinds of groomers. Anyway, a social media page landing page linked to Dinis's TikTok directs users to PragerU Kids. I didn't even realize there was a kids version of it, but that's because he's a groomer. An offshoot of right-wing propaganda organization PragerU. Another Tradwife influencer, Gwen the Milkmaid, follows a similar video formula, posting imagery of prairie dresses, bows, and baking, overlaid with text pushing conspiracy theories and right-wing talking points. In one recent video, Gwen prepares homemade pasta with overlaid text reading, Tradwives have been getting a lot of hate recently, and is it really a surprise? The elites have been working for decades to destroy femininity, masculinity, healthy marriages, and families. And like very quickly turns over into a screed. But the imagery is la 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 la, you know, very Snow White, very whatever. She captioned the video with a lengthy elaboration of this claim, asserting that the so-called elites use the same playbook with Tradwives as they do with every other truth that can't be discredited, which includes using the media to spread lies, which is, of course, what she's doing. Everything the Tradwife movement stands for goes against the establishment elites' agenda, Gwen wrote. It's a movement that knows how much our children need us instead of letting them be manipulated by culture and government schools. What? She concluded the video caption by writing, "Just my latest conspiracy theory. What do you think about this?" Just asking questions. Right-wing media have also embraced one of TikTok's most popular Tradwife influencers, Estee Williams, who has appeared on Fox News, OAN, and The Daily Wire to lament about the attack on traditional values. Anyway, we're running short on time here, so I don't know how much further we're going to get through this rundown. One, I just wanted to note that another, influencer niche turns out to have been trying to influence on something completely different all along. That's very interesting. That's using the cover to try to insinuate the right-wing messaging in under, a different guise. I think that's interesting. And it's kind of interesting alongside the Weird Time interview with Trump, and then, of course, the thing we started the show with, just to bring it all the way back to what's his guy's name? Matthew Schmitz or something like that, that wrote this piece about, Donald Trump is really He's abandoning democracy, but from a democratic viewpoint, you see, and it's all about just responding to a higher law. And it seems to me very much along the same lines here. These claims, there's part of the claim in this piece about Trump and what he's all about, and the higher law and democratically undemocratic, whatever. It all sort of goes along. It's all of a piece. That is to say, they say, well, you're against government elites running your life and trying to tell you what to do with yourself, right? You want to push back and be an individual. Well, one way to push back and be an individual is join our rigidly authoritarian movement to overthrow democracy, to make everybody wear red hats and kick out anybody that doesn't look like us, and or join our movement to throw off the elite. That sounds like a good thing. No one wants to be under the thumb of the elite, right? And we're going to be our own selves and be individuals and be free. Free to do what? Pen ourselves into rigid gender roles and and prescriptive advice about how we should be living our life in every possible aspect, from what we eat to what medical care we allow ourselves, to how we educate our children and decorate our homes, and what we drink on our front porches and what we say about ourselves when we do it. It's two weird angles on authoritarianism as freedom, which seems like kind of a dangerous thing, that there are even people considering this for even a moment. But then again, most people skipped the reading in school and didn't realize that it was all laid out for them, I guess, in Animal Farm, and they must have missed it. Or maybe the Cliff's Notes didn't really drive it home in the same way. All right, time to get out of here for the day. Tomorrow's Friday. That gives us an opportunity to wrap up a lot of loose ends, bring in a lot more of the long reads. Still have something from Rosalind McGregor waiting in the background here. Friday is always a good day for that. I can tell you now, ahead of time, the Friday next, not tomorrow, but a week from Friday, I think I will have to be off the air, as it is Collection from College Day once again. And this time, hey, I might have to wade my way through some sort of protest or encampment or counter-protest or who knows what. I don't think so. I don't think there's one on the campus there, but by that time, could be anything happening. Just sort of fair warning there. We'll see what we can prepare for you in the week to come. We'll be right back. Tomorrow.
Networksradio.com.
Not right back. It'll take us a day.
You have been listening to Kagro in the morning with David Waldman.
But I'll tell you who will be right here. Of course, it's Justice Putnam with the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, collecting the stories from around the country and around the world. Starting off, there is a major update on the Republican effort to keep Biden off the November ballot in Ohio and Alabama. Alert! Alert! Stay tuned.